hope you're doing well today. Today we're talking about the word calling. Now, whenever you meet someone for the first time, chances are you will be asked, what is it that you do? Meaning, what is your job, or where did you retire from? What field of work were you in? And we often respond with our job title, the company name, the responsibilities that we did and do week in and week out. But we don't often use the word calling to describe what it is that we do. But throughout the Bible and throughout history, God clearly and directly called people of all kinds for very special tasks. And so today, instead of being asked, what is it that you do? I want to ask you, what is your calling? Today we're looking at the calling of Ezekiel, a man who was a priest during a very difficult time in Israel's history, during the Babylonian exile. In 598 BC, the Babylonians, who were these infamous bullies of God's people throughout the Old Testament, they had a large, powerful army. They had cruel kings. And in 598 BC, they conquered the kingdom of Judah. And in doing so, they forced many of the Jewish people, including Ezekiel, into exile. So imagine if today a foreign nation invaded the United States and defeated our country and devastated it, laid it to waste, and that we were forced, uprooted from our homes and our communities, and forced to live in a foreign country where we did not know the language, we weren't at all familiar with anything there, and we lived under oppressive and difficult conditions. Imagine how taxing that would be on a person's soul to have to go through that experience. And this was Ezekiel's reality, along with many other Jewish people. And it is in the heart of this despairing situation that God calls Ezekiel. So let's read how it happened together. We're going to read a little bit of chapter 1 and the very beginning of chapter 2, and I'll summarize a bit in between. So let's take a look at it together. In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the river Chebar, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin, the word of the Lord came to the priest Ezekiel, son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was on him there. As I looked, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the middle of the fire something like gleaming amber. And once Ezekiel's vision begins and he sees this storm of fire and wind approaching him, he then sees these bizarre creatures, four of them, and each of the creatures has four faces. One face is like a human's, another's is like a lion's, and an ox, and an eagle. These creatures had wings. They had multiple eyes. Their torsos were made of fire, and they moved in strange ways. And in addition to these four creatures, there were four enormous wheels that moved with these creatures. And everywhere that the glory of the Lord, God's Spirit, moved, these creatures followed, and these wheels moved in conjunction with these creatures. So, really, a bizarre and remarkable scene. Who can imagine what Ezekiel was experiencing as he saw this? And once the creatures are described in detail, we're told that there's this crystal dome shining above the creatures, and it is from this dome area where we will see uh, God on his throne and him speak. And now we'll pick up with verse 26. And above the dome, over their heads, there was something like a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was something that seemed like a human form. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of someone speaking. He said to me, O mortal, stand up on your feet, and I will speak with you. And when he spoke to me, a spirit entered into me and set me on my feet. and I heard him speaking to me. As with all the Bible stories that we look at and study and read together, there are a million different things that we could talk about with this passage, as bizarre and strange and unique as it is with the visions of God's glory and the four creatures. But I want to keep things simple today, as I'm prone to do, and focus on just a few key thoughts from this passage, in particular, how Ezekiel was called by God. I want us to note that Ezekiel's calling came at a specific time and a specific place. In the beginning, when we read it was the fourth year and the fifth month and all those things, that equates to the summer of 593 BC. This is when Ezekiel was called. He would have been 30 years old at the time. And this 593 BC was 5 years after the first group of exiles was deported to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. So the exiles have been living there in exile for 5 years at this point, and it's at this time that God calls Ezekiel. It takes place by the Chebar River, which to this day is in present day Iraq. And the context, the emotional context of this situation, of course, is that there's a lot of confusion among the Hebrew people. There's worry, there's sorrow, despair. They have no clue what the future looks like for them, but it's not very promising. And certainly during this pandemic time, as we continue to be quarantined and slowly and gradually look to opening things back up, we may feel some of those emotions: worry and fear, uncertainty about the future. We can certainly relate to the exiles in Babylon and what they were experiencing and the emotions they were sharing. But since God first called Abraham to lead the Hebrew people out of Egypt, God has called forth prophets and dreamers and messengers to speak truth and to offer guidance during difficult times. So, to return to our initial question, what might God be calling you to do in times like these? Is there an idea that just won't let you go? Is there a daydream that comes to mind consistently that if only it were true, it would excite you and bring you so much joy? Is there a passion of yours that intersects with a particular need in the world? God is calling, God has always called people if we would just listen. God calls people of all ages and backgrounds and experiences to do amazing things. I think about Greta Thunberg, the young lady who's just 17 years old, who has single handedly mobilized millions of people around the world to enact climate change policy, to shed light on the unsustainable practices that nations are doing, and helping create a safer and a better earth for future generations. I think about a lady named Miss Betty Reed Soskin from Richmond, California, who is our country's oldest national park ranger. At 98 years old, she still shows up for her job every day with a smile on her face and inspiration in her heart to do her best for the world and for the people that she serves. I'd like to read a quote for you from a book that I just finished. It was actually a recommendation from my dad, so thanks, Dad, for that. It's called Primal by Mark Batterson. You may recognize him. He wrote the book In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day, so a pretty intriguing title. But I want to offer this quote to you from page 28. He says, "Let me ask you a question. What would bother you endlessly if you don't do it? What makes you glad or sad or mad? What puts a holy smile on your face? What causes your spirit to sob uncontrollably? What makes you pound your fist on the table out of righteous indignation? Somewhere in the mixture of that gladness and sadness and madness is your God ordained passion. Or maybe I should say compassion, because you are feeling what God feels. And once you identify that, doing something about it isn't optional. You can't not do something about it." We are all called by God to make this world more like His kingdom. And the ways that we're called may not be as dramatic as Ezekiel's or as worldwide as Greta Thunberg, but they are all important things that God calls us to. Another example I wanted to share with you that I came across recently of a beautiful call story is a place called Stone Acres Farm in Stonington, Connecticut. And the director, Jen Rothman, had a wonderful idea one day to begin a program there at Stoneacre Farms where children, very young children, could come and see the vegetables and the fruits that were growing and learn about them and have hands-on interactive activities with them. And some rational minds might would have told her children don't care about learning about how plants grow. Children don't even want to eat fruits and vegetables. They just want happy meals and to watch TV and do what they want to do. Aren't there more important things you could do? Aren't there more lofty goals you could shoot for? But to this day, Rothman continually gathers with the staff at Stone Acres and watches these children joyfully pull up carrots and pick tomatoes and learn about the importance of pollinating insects and why they matter to us. And these children, as young as 3 and 4 years old, they take these vegetables that they so proudly harvested into the kitchen set up there for them. And they cook meals with their parents and with the Stoneacre staff. Now, of course, most of the world will never hear about Stoneacre's farm in Connecticut and the good things that they do. But one thing we can be sure of is that there are numerous children in that region who will have beautiful memories of going to that farm with their family and an entire younger generation growing up learning to eat things that are good for them and good for the earth and restoring that connection that's all too often broken between where our food comes from and how the earth gives to us and how we can give back to it. A wonderful example of an idea that was seen through to its end because of God's calling on Jen's life and her willingness to say yes to that. Somewhere in the world or in your community, there is a need that aligns perfectly with your passion. God has a mission for you where you will feel more alive than you've ever felt before because you will be living more fully into who God made you to be. And the last thing I'd like to point out about Ezekiel's call story today is that Ezekiel's calling was bigger than himself. It was something that he could not do on his own. Ezekiel could have never conceived or understood his calling under his own intellect or strength. It was God who initiated this calling, and God empowered him to get it done. Your dream, your vision, your calling may seem impossible. Logic and reason may tell you not to waste your time with such a pie in the sky idea. And that's the exact situation where God does his best work. So don't worry about what the results will look like or with knowing how exactly you'll get to where you need to get. Just begin and trust God to guide you. If God calls you to do something, he will supply you with what you need to get it done. He will sustain you and strengthen you just like he did for Ezekiel and just like he has done for countless others before us. So what is your calling? What idea or passion or dream will not let you go? What do you continually think about that will bother you endlessly until you begin it? Maybe it's picking up a pen and writing the story you've known for a while that the world needs to hear. Maybe it's digging out your old music books or your paintbrushes. Maybe it's applying for school or adopting a shelter pet or volunteering for a local charity or beginning a nonprofit. Maybe it's opening your yard or your home to children in your neighborhood or partnering with a local school to mentor students who are struggling. The possibilities are endless, and so is the potential for goodness and for joy. Whatever God may be impressing upon your heart and calling you to do, may you join with Ezekiel in saying yes. May you have the courage to say yes, even if it doesn't yet make sense, even if it doesn't seem clear or promise results. All you need is to take the first step of faithfulness. And our God, who is always faithful, promises to guide you. In his name and for his glory. Amen.